Who is today's great man? I'll also give you a hint. Do you know this logo? I think that everyone know this logo.
Of course, it's Apple. I guess today's hero is Steve Jobs.
Correct. Today we are going to talk about Steve Jobs.
Good. What was Steve Jobs' childhood?
Steve Jobs was born on February 24, 1955 in San Francisco, California to an American mother and Syrian father. However, they were unmarried, and Jobs' birth mother, Joanne Siebel, had been separated from Jobs' father against her father's objection, so she wanted her child to be adopted as soon as he was born. So Jobs broke up with his biological parents and was adopted by Paul and Clara Jobs, and this ill-fated past had a significant impact on Jobs' personality.
The reason Steve Jobs had some rough personality may be because of his unhappy past as a child.
It really could be. The Paul Jobs couple thought of Steve Jobs as his own son and raised him hard, but it is said that when he was young, Jobs was a child who nettled his parents a lot. He didn't show any genius and didn't study much. And he liked to build something by collecting unused parts from the garage instead of playing with the children because children were making fun of him for being an orphan. He actually learned the craft from his father, admiring his father, who was a great craftsman and admired to see his father do anything well. Jobs' entrepreneurial career began when he became interested in electronics in high school. Jobs, who had been living without a dream, suddenly began to take an interest in electronics, and he took after-school classes at Hewlett-Packard. After graduating from high school in 1972, he was hired as a summer intern at Hewlett-Packard. There, he meets Steve Wozniak, a co-founder of Apple. After his internship, he entered the Department of Philosophy at Reed College in Portland, Oregon. He dropped out after one semester because he didn't like his major and didn't think his college life was worth it enough to invest all of his parents' savings, he said later.
If he thought that his studies were not helpful, he boldly abandoned it and pursued his own path. It's amazing.
Exactly. He said that attending many liberal arts classes after dropping out of his university helped him a lot later especially when he later designed fonts for UI. He was particularly interested in Eastern philosophy, under the influence of which his religion was Buddhism. In the 1970s, he fell in love with the Zen thought of Buddhism, and once practiced under a Japanese monk named Otagawa Kofun. There is an anecdote that at one time he was so engrossed that he even seriously thought about becoming a monk himself, but fortunately went through the IT path at the dismay of his teacher.
He was also interested in Eastern philosophy and humanities classics. It seems that the humanities classic had a good influence on his imagination and creativity.
Of course. I hope that readers will also read a lot of humanities classics. Next, Apple's start. After that, he got a job as a game designer at the game company Atari by chance. There, Jobs, immersed in early video games such as Pong, became very interested in computers. However, he resigned after not completing another year at Atari. At the time, Wozniak was still working at HP, but Jobs, who joined the do-it-yourself computer building club he was running, was completely obsessed with computers. After that, Wozniak and Jobs worked together to build their own computer, and in 1976 they created the first prototype of the Apple I, a model that will go down in PC history. Although it was a chunky plastic substrate and silicon chip in a wooden case that didn't even have a monitor, it caused quite a stir and gave them quite a bit of money. After that, successors such as Apple II and Apple II Plus succeeded one after another, and Steve Jobs gained fame and wealth. Everything went well, but there is always a crisis. After Apple II and Apple II Plus, Apple begins to face a crisis. Once the Apple II began to be challenged by the Commodore 64, the Apple III, which was not made by Woz and was heavily involved in Jobs' intervention, was completely failed. When the Apple III went down, Jobs began to take an interest in GUI and started the Lisa project and the Macintosh project at the same time. Originally, Jobs was working on the Lisa project, which he named his daughter, but he was kicked out of the Lisa team and took on the Macintosh project. After that, Jobs began to pay great attention to the Macintosh, as competition for the Lisa project that had expelled him flared up. When the merging of the Lisa team and the Macintosh team was discussed, the salary issue arose. Macintosh team was furious when they found out that they were being paid only $10,000. Jobs succeeded in calming them down by promising the Macintosh team a bonus, but this time the Apple II team, who had been working for less pay than them, uprising. The great storm that Jobs brought had put Jobs' position within Apple at risk. Also, of course, he continued to have a conflict with the new John Sculley, and Jobs, who decided to expel Sculley, boldly cast a vote at the board of directors, but he lost because he had already lost his reputation and his performance was poor. In this way, he is kicked out of the company he founded in 1985.
It's really shocking to be kicked out of the company he created.
We all know the outcome, but it will be interesting to see how he goes through the process to recover. When he was kicked out, he took a few engineers with him and started a company called Next to develop workstations. At this time, his name was also high for various events. It was at this time that he received intensive meditation instruction from the Otagawa Kofun, a Japanese monk of the Jotong order, whom he had known previously. It is said that the experience at that time had a significant impact on Jobs' personality and management philosophy. It was technically very well received, but it was devastated in the market. And in 1986, Lucasfilm acquired Pixar, which was in charge of CG, but at this time it was only acquired as part of the next project. However, this decision had a completely different outcome from what Jobs intended.
Pixar? Is this Pixar the same Pixar I know? He may be lucky as well as he's so insightful.
Of course, it's same with that. Pixar was initially purchased by Jobs for his project. The reason Jobs bought Pixar was because he needed software to be installed as killer software on his computer. However, Steve Jobs first received a report about the company and saw the short animation the creative team had made, then asked, "Whose piece of work?" And he got an answer. Since that time he didn't interfere creative team.
I think that he acted like that because he saw a certain possibility while looking at the work.
I think so. As you expected, later, Pixar released a short 3D animation called Teen Toy, and when it received an Academy Award, he was convinced that it would be successful, so he invested and supported the production of the 3D animation. And Jobs was offered a contract with Disney to produce an animation with unfair conditions. Nevertheless, he gave up his greed and signed a contract, which was a huge hit with Toy Story, which was released in 1995. He was convinced that Toy Story would be successful even before the release, so he planned Pixar's listing on the Nasdaq a week after its release, despite objections from those around him. That plan worked, and the 80% stake in Pixar that Jobs owned at the time quickly became worth more than $1 billion. Thanks to the success of Toy Story and thanks to Pixar, Jobs succeeds in returning from the epitome of a failed CEO to a leader in the next generation of tech. In 2006, the Walt Disney Company acquired Pixar in a stock exchange for $7.4 billion, which gave Steve Jobs a 7% stake in the Walt Disney Company, allowing him to sit on the board as a director of the Walt Disney Company. He is now completely recovered.
His success is like a movie.
But does his true success only begin here? Next time, we will talk about his return to Apple and the rest of his life.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time.